Sorry, Frank.
Thanks, Cynthia. Do you have any public comment submitted?
No.
Then I'll draw people's attention to the minutes, the last meeting. I'll have you.
Move to approve the minutes of May 23rd.
I'll second.
Made. Is there any comment on that? I think we did have one addition or revision there, that the call to order was not Kyle at the last meeting. That might have just been a typo, cut and paste thing, but it was me. And I think that was all that I saw. Right. It's been moved and seconded by Kyle. All in favor?
Oh, I'm sorry. And Ron and Rachel, you cannot vote yet until the board approves your nominations, presumably next week.
But I like the enthusiasm.
Okay.
Right.
They're ready. Right? That was a good test run. Excellent. The next thing on our agenda are the nomination of committee members. I don't know if there's a listing here. So the governance committee reviews to make sure that we have a good balance. I know, Cynthia, you do a lot of interviewing when you're meeting with new board members, their interest areas and where they feel that they could contribute. So, oh, and it looks like Sean is joining us to just add that. Hey, Sean. So Prithvi Satish, who is not on the board, but was someone who came to us through the student interview process and wanted to be involved. And I think has already attended one of the finance and growth meetings, is listed here. Colby and Rachel are sort of splitting duties here. Colby was looking at the Mansfield Festival, where he would become involved. Rachel, governance. So it's a great place to be. Favorite committee. Louis Goffinet also been very involved in the festival in the past, and this is a natural for him. And Ron, welcome. Thank you for showing interest in the governance committee. Are there any questions about this process? And Cynthia, this will be then on as part of the next board meeting that it's moved through the governance committee.
Yeah, I think the next step would be for the governance committee to make a motion to present those nominees to the board.
Betsy?
I move that we present the following nominations for committees to the board at the next meeting. And I'm going to mess up his name. Prithvi?
Yeah.
Okay. Satish for finance and growth. Colby Tremblay, Celebrate Mansfield Festival. Louis Goffinet, Celebrate Mansfield Festival. Ron Shuren, governance. And Rachel Goldberg, governance.
I'll second.
Second by Kyle. Those in favor? Right. Those have been advanced. Thank you. The next item was discussion about the pipeline of board members. So actually one of the event that we had at Hops 44 was a good chance to network with some of the business owners and employees. And from that, I think we had a couple of who have showed some interest in getting involved, not necessarily at the board level, but certainly at committee and getting more connected. So I've asked Cynthia to keep that on our running list. We have a sort of a running list that we just keep of people who are interested, and as we start to chart out sort of where we need to fill some gaps in the upcoming year, as people roll off naturally, or I think, Cynthia, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we still have technically now 2 positions that we could add to get to 16. We'll have 14 board members at this time. So there is movement to expand a little bit. And I think we've been sort of cautious and sort of waiting to see what needs the partnership will have coming out of strategic planning. So any discussion there? Thoughts? I know, Kyle, if you have a thought, and Sean too, with the strategic plan as to areas that we're gonna be prospectively needing, we should be particularly aware of. I think at this point, we're just taking names of people who have shown interest, but all of you, if you're involved, I think you, Betsy, Ron, and Steve too, if you're involved with other areas, of good volunteers who would be good for the board, just pass the names along so that we can consider them as a committee. Yeah, Steve?
Frank, I think it was kind of implied in your comments, but just for Ron and Rachel's benefit, the governance committee is responsible for proposing nominees for the board of directors to the full board for consideration, or to the full partnership members for consideration. And we're also responsible for recommending to the board of directors committee members. So just so that Ron and Rachel are aware of those two responsibilities of our committee.
Thank you.
On. Okay. I think that was just a point of information. We have on our agenda sort of a standing item about the strategic action plan and the working groups, and sort of an update, and just going to go around to see if Sean, do you have an update on strategic planning, or Kyle as chair?
Yeah, I can start, Frank. Can you hear me okay? Yes, okay, great. Hi, everyone. So, and this will help, I think, answer a little bit of what you were speaking about just now, Frank, for the new members, and welcome. So the working group main work, I think, is done at this point. We have, I think all three working groups have met to a point where we have some near and long-term specific goals. How this committee gets involved and then the executive committee gets involved is how we go about the semantics and completing those goals, particularly those that there will be actionable items that will be a cost to the partnership in order to complete. The one that from my group that comes immediately to mind that may use general funds or I think that's where we left it, Cynthia, that they might use general funds is bringing a transportation engineer on board to look at the potential or feasibility of closing some of Dog Lane, and which direction that would happen in order to expand the use of the plaza. So, or the square, I mean, sorry. So, how that comes to this committee and when it comes to committee it's very fuzzy at this point. I have a little bit of vacation lag right now. I had some time off last week. So we did. Yeah, I'm in a meeting. Thanks, John. Sorry, my door's open. But we met shortly before I went on vacation, Kyle, Cynthia, and I, and we talked about how to engage this committee and executive committee, and that's one way that we'll be bringing stuff to these members to make sure that we're on track and there's some consensus across those two groups to make sure that we have checked that box before we take action. That fair summary, Cynthia, Kyle? And I chaired one of the three working groups, I should say. Kyle chaired another one, and then Steve, who's not represented on this committee, Steve Farino, chaired the third working group. Cynthia?
Yeah, I would just say with Steve's group, the business and property owner engagement, I think we have a meeting next week. So we are looking at doing another social in late September, early October. As Frank mentioned, it was, I think, very successful for a lot of reasons, got some interesting / good feedback. And I think people were happy to get together. So we wanted to keep that group, you know, and the whole board wanted to keep the momentum going. So it's a nice atmosphere, rather kind of the interview process one-on-one works well too, but I think this is a great way to do it. So.
And I think I would just add that I thought the business owner, the tenant engagement was a fantastic outcome. I think, you know, we also got a lot of unfiltered feedback from those folks about maybe their feelings about the property owners. I think between myself and Sean and some others, you know, certainly we deal with a lot of people here on campus that are not as immersed in some of the details that we might be relative to the property owners and the vacancy challenges, sort of the optics of what is going on in the downtown. And, you know, so I'd say for the group, you know, for me, a big focus relative to Steve's working group that will be necessary is we really need to get an advanced level of everyday engagement from the property owners. From you know, it's not enough to simply say that they're working with leasing agents to try to fill the spaces. It's becoming an unacceptable eyesore. And frankly, a detriment to the university, that there's not a sit-down restaurant, that there's not, that there aren't conversations about bigger and better things. So bluntly, you know, Cynthia and I had a very uncomfortable conversation with one of the property owners, and I'm glad it was uncomfortable for them because it needs to start to be, because it's becoming really uncomfortable for us. When you have you know, we're trying to hire a new president, and where exactly would we take them to eat? That, you know, and you know, we have recruits on campus, and you know, for our athletics programs, and the best you could do is, you know, take them for a sandwich. Lunch is your option. So
can I ask?
Yeah.
What is the basic problem? Is it price? Is it lack of aggressive recruiting? Why is there such difficulty?
I mean, it's definitely price. They will not own it or wear it that it's the price. It's absolutely the price,
Yeah.
Unequivocally. And again, you know, I say this with all due respect, it's insulting. You know, my job at UConn is to manage the partners that are in several of the spaces that we're actually leasing from them. So we know what the prices are, and yet they still will have, you know, they'll still say to us, oh, well, you know, it's market. It's not market. It is absolutely 1000% not market for Stores, Mansfield, Connecticut. It is, and you know, so and I think we may have talked about it in this group previous. I know we've talked about it on the board meetings, but I mean, if they come to us one more time with another sandwich shop or a noodle, I mean, literally, we had a conversation, and the conversation about the Geno space was to fill it with a sandwich shop, and it's just, I can't even imagine what, you know, what our president or provost or CFO, or I already know what, because I've met with them, and it's head scratching. So it's, you know, I think, and to say that these types of restaurants don't want to be in this area is ridiculous, because I mean, Fenton River is 6 miles down the road.
Yeah.
I mean, why wouldn't Fenton River want to be in downtown Stores? Well, I'll tell you why they don't want to be in downtown Stores, because they get a better deal down the road. So one of the engagements that we had at the happy hour, the gentleman that owns the package store in the downtown, or one of the package stores in the downtown, also owns one down at Eastbrook Mall. he said the Eastbrook Mall location outperforms the downtown stores by 5 times. By 5 times. So, you know, I, again, you know, and since you know, I'm glad Cynthia sits in on those calls, because it probably keeps me, and this will be surprising to her, keeps me from really speaking my mind. So I know I know it can be uncomfortable to have these types of conversations sometimes with folks, but I, you know, I very plainly and simply let them know that the perception, whether it's the reality or not, but the perception is that the problem in the downtown are the property owners. And doesn't matter whether they think they're doing a good job or not. The perception is they're doing a lousy job, and places are empty. The business owners are not happy. The only time they hear from them was when the rent's due, and and we're being forced to deal with it, and deal with it at a, you know, at a level that it's above our pay grade. We're not, you know, we are not being paid. We should not be worrying about how to fill spaces, and yet we're having a ridiculous amount of engagement with them about how to fill spaces. And so that's, I think it's important for us as we talk about engagement going forward, or talk about future board members, or any of these types of things, though that's the reality, is that over the next 3 years, we are at a make or break with this downtown, relative to how it is, you know, how it's being populated.
Sean, you had your hand up, and then Betsy.
You can go ahead, Betsy. I'll go after you.
Well, thank you, Sean. Do they have any interest in renting out these spaces, Kyle? I mean, how do they make money if the spaces aren't rented?
Yeah, I mean, so it's an interesting challenge, right? So as in one example, the former Amazon space, the lease is still in effect, and Amazon's still paying for it. So there's certainly no incentive for them to beat the bushes and rent that space. And then, you know, again, I think they're particular in some respects about how they, you know, they want to fill it obviously with the right tenant that's going to, you know, be successful.
So do we.
You know, but I don't know. I'm not convinced, quite frankly, based on the amount of conversations that we've had with them, that this particular group of individuals actually knows what that might be. And yet, you know, we have students like Rachel and Probas before, and others that are in the space on a regular basis. Students like Probas's group that have done studies to try to find out what people want to see, and yet we've presented it to these groups, and they keep coming back to us with sandwich shops and noodle shops, and
they don't seem to have any
another
interest.
Yeah.
They don't seem to have any interest in working with the partnership.
They do, but but again, I think the biggest challenge, I think to your initial point, I don't think they're not going to go out of business if they don't rent all these spaces. We are, but they're not. And there's not enough, and that's something that Sean and I, we've been talking to some folks here about ways to, to engage at a little higher level. UConn is certainly one of the biggest tenants in the space. I mean, we rent, we rent the bookstore, we rent UConn Health spaces, we rent the museum, we rent 20 apartments in the Oaks. I mean, UConn is spending a lot of money in that space, and it's time for us to not just spend our money. It's time for us to say, this is the way we need to do this, because it's going to start to become a detriment for recruitment, for in terms of everything that we're doing. So, and I know the people at a leadership level here on campus are concerned, for sure.
Thank you.
Sean?
Yeah, thanks, Frank. I just wanted to add to what I said earlier that I think the September 1st board meeting, we should start to see an update to, what did we call it? A dashboard, Cynthia, on the strategic plan? Is that what we're calling it?
Yes,
Yeah. And it would probably be good if, as a matter of keeping this as a check-in item for governance and a standing agenda item as a check-in for governance, to use that same dashboard as kind of a preview for the full board meeting. And we can use that to facilitate conversation on any actionable items. Because the more I thought about it after I said it, it may not actually go to executive committee. Each time we go to take action, there might be things that are better left for this group to handle on its own. And executive doesn't necessarily meet as often as governance, right? So
That would be a good addition. And I really appreciate Sean and Kyle and you guys updating this group, because I think it's an important responsibility of the governance committee to be thinking about our composition and sort of issues, and also be able to support you where you need it. I don't know if there's anything the governance can do to support these discussions, Kyle. But please know that you have a sympathetic group here that wants to be able to take action.
Frank, if I could add to the second part of the discussion a little bit, something I heard over the weekend that was only prompted by me speaking excitedly about our work on the strategic plan and what the future may have in store, in stark contrast to the existing condition on the street. There is still a sentiment, it seems, in this community about the history of parking in the downtown. And whether it's real or way in the past, it still is out there in our community. And I think still to this day, stories about ticketed residents and anecdotal comments about residents should be receiving $5, not being charged $50 to park in order to spend their money downtown. There's that sort of noise going out in the community that, based on what may have been a handful of experiences that don't happen anymore. Best I've seen, there's not the type of ticketing that occurred, I think, over a short period of time. But the impact that was felt in the community and what it means to the types of folks that don't go downtown anymore, I think is another part of the problem. It's not entirely on the property owners. There's a lot of work to do in changing the perception of the downtown. And I'll say probably it starts with getting things in those storefronts that people want to go to, but we may also be confronted with the challenge of getting the people to those places because of a perception that exists in the community. Hopefully that will go away in time, but who knows? I don't know. Somehow we've got to engage more folks that we don't typically engage with, that are just as happy going to Willimantic or somewhere else before going to the downtown.
Thank you for that discussion. Is there any other questions of the work groups? No, let's move on then to the item number 7, the emergency succession plan. This comes to our committee because I think it was originally initiated out of this committee a couple of years ago, that this was something that needed to be accomplished, and delighted to see how much work has been put into it to design it and fill it in. So I hope you've had a chance to at least review it and give some, if you have any thoughts. Cynthia, I think you had suggested or how it be combined a little bit with review of goals and responsibilities of the staff. Is did you think that they should be attached, or is it just something that the board needs to reconcile?
Yeah, I think in looking this over and, a big apology that this took so long. Once I got Josh here, he was able to kind of help me move forward with this. So it's to be signed by me and Kyle. Kyle is board president. But when I, looked at my job description, it hasn't been done since, 2017, I think. So it's just, 5 years, maybe time to look at that. And then for me to look at Kathleen and Denise's job descriptions, or I should say the positions job descriptions, to see whether those are still accurate. And just to make sure we don't let those things slide for too long. Whether it's a full-blown evaluation that we've done before, where we've worked with the town's HR department and they've done, a comprehensive, or I'm sorry, a review of, say, my job position versus another position in the town that might be comparable, that kind of thing. Some peer review. I mean, there's different ways I think it can be done. So I think it's just something to discuss. And we have our executive committee meeting next week, so perhaps that can be a brief part of that agenda. But this, I think, it's a flexible document. Things change. But I think at this point, unless there's any questions or changes, I can get it ready for me and Kyle to sign and share it with Kathleen and Denise. And I did make sure I told them what their responsibilities would be if they need to jump into action.
Is there, go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, the only comment I had was on attachment B, relative to the tier 1 emergency contacts and contact information. All of those numbers, all those phone numbers should be cell phone numbers. None of them should be office numbers. So if we can just get that updated, even if they're personal cell phone numbers, again, we obviously, in most cases, an emergency is going to happen in off hours, and calling somebody in the office at 9 o'clock at night isn't going to do anybody any good. So,
Yeah, good point.
but I thought otherwise. I thought it was good.
Is there a natural time where we would review this annually to make sure that everything's updated, the contacts and phone numbers and things?
Yeah, we can. So at the next meeting, we usually do our work plan for this committee
Okay,
at the September meeting for October to October. So I can set it up for maybe a time where the committee doesn't have a heavy load and put it in there.
okay. Steve, we're talking with, thanks for rejoining. We're on to discussing the emergency succession plan, which I think may have even, those discussions started, I think, when you were chair in governance, that it would be important to have as a nonprofit to be able to have this all down in one place so that we had a plan ready for action. So thank you for initiating that. Any other, Sean, I don't know, is your hand up? Is that a new hand or is that an old hand?
No, it's a new hand.
Okay.
So Cynthia, we're obviously going to use Cynthia as an example here, but Cynthia wears 2 hats. So I'm wondering how this corresponds to her role as the economic development director for the town. That's got a separate plan that wouldn't involve Kathleen, I presume, or Denise.
That's a good question, Sean. I don't know. I don't know, I mean, Denise doesn't really do any economic development work sort of in that vein. Kathleen definitely does and Josh does. So it wouldn't be, it would make sense that Kathleen could take that over, as well, but I have not had that discussion with Ryan.
Yeah.
Or anybody else.
I guess there's a couple questions in there for me. Is that the roles and responsibilities of the executive director position of the partnership doesn't necessarily include the roles and responsibilities that Cynthia has with her second hat for the town, correct? Or is it unique to Cynthia? Because if it's the former, then we would be conveying those roles and responsibilities onto the succession plan.
Ron?
If it's the latter, we're not.
Ron, did you want to?
Well, my feeling is that this all rests with the town in terms of the economic development aspect. And there may be a need for discussion within the town in terms of having an emergency fill-in situation rather than something developed here.
Steve?
I agree with Ron. I think that it's two separate entities that have responsibility for two separate sets of policies. And I think regardless of what might become of the role of the executive director of the Economic Development Commission, we're only concerned with the role of our executive director of the Mansfield Downtown Partnership. And if the Economic Development Commission wishes to adopt its own policy, I think that's up to that commission or to the town council. But I don't see where the fact that Cynthia happens to serve in a dual role for both would have any bearing on a policy that we would adopt, which is solely for the Mansfield Downtown Partnership.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I guess it really drills down to whether or not there's any roles and responsibilities of her second hat that's embedded into her role as executive director of the partnership, which it sounds like there may not be.
Well, I mean, there's certainly a lot of overlap, so.
Yeah,
But I can follow up with Ryan. I mean, I think,
Yeah.
to be honest, the way that it seems to work now is a little more ad hoc. You know, like with Linda Painter left, and so they had Jennifer fall into that role. I don't think there's anything set up in terms of how those things would work at the town, but I don't know that for sure.
yeah. I mean, honestly, I bring this all up just in fairness to Kathleen and Denise, that they're not going to, you know, by way of this action plan, take on more than they're prepared or maybe
Yep.
even qualified to do, even if it's just up to 3 months. You know?
Betsy?
Maybe what Cynthia should do is have a conversation with Ryan and just tell him that the partnership is looking at this situation and that, you know, we want to be clear that we don't think it's our role to have a plan for that part of her job and see where he goes with it. Would that work for you, Sid?
Yeah, no, I think that is a great next step.
Great. Any other comments? It's not it looks like this can advance then with those updates on the phone numbers, and then it looks, as I'm looking at our future agendas, it looks like we're getting into, as you said, Cynthia, the work plan, and then starting to review job descriptions and how those relate to the board. So maybe those can be folded in. Will this be then signed off before the next board meeting?
I know Kyle's going to be out of town for a couple of days, and I've actually, Sean and Kyle, if you can hang on after this meeting, I need to talk to you about some scheduling issues. So I think it could be, or he and I could sign it at the executive committee meeting next week before.
Great.
But I could
Okay.
definitely have the cell phone numbers updated, you know, this week or early next week.
Okay. Great, thank you. Anything else for the group? I do want to say thank you for everybody's been very polite and raising their hands, setting a good example. make the chairs roll really easy. You don't step on each other speaking and everything. So thank you very much to.
I just want to clarify that I'm the old hand.
Well, I love hearing everybody's voices and perspective. There's a lot of wisdom on this group and a lot of contacts. And when we get into these issues, it's really wonderful to be able to hear people's interplay on things. And yeah, I think it's good for the partnership. So thank you. Any other items I may have missed? If not, then I'll call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, everyone, for coming.
have a great night, everybody.
Thank you.
And Kyle and Sean, if you can hold on, that would be great.